Welcome to heCast, the official podcast of He Changed It. As always, I am Mike Chisholm. As always, I am so excited to have conversations around the world of men's mental wellness. We have all sorts of different types of guests on this show. And some of my favorite are the ones where, yes, there are clinical people that come on the show, and we talk about clinical things when it comes to mental health. And the perspective from the man side of things. But sometimes we have people on here where they come and they tell their story. Now, this is one of the most special episodes that we've ever done. 2 hours. Holy cow, Mike, what's going on? Yeah, I love the long form, but I understand we try and shoot for 45 to an hour. I get it. This one here, everybody who is watching and listening, this is a tale. I got to tell you the story here. There's no embellishment. I mean, we go watch movies that are based on true events and things like that. And the idea that the writers, the talented writers out there will embellish stories and make the story that much better. This one here needs no embellishment whatsoever. Dave Muller is my guest, a wonderful South African man. We really scratch the surface of a story that is so vibrant and rich. That I don't believe a writer could necessarily even I don't think you could write this. And he wrote a book based on what happened to him and his family. I'm going to tell you this. Everybody's happy. Everybody has made it through. It's a happy ending. Okay. I'm going to tell you that straight up, because as you're listening to the story of what happened when his family found themselves marooned on Mozambique, and they were approached by a small regiment of an army of child soldiers, what happened. And 7 weeks they were there and captured and being held. And there's some horrific stuff in this, but we keep it talking about some horrific things. We do keep it PG-13. It's not a rated R. We don't go into, we certainly don't, take some of the hard things that Dave and his family saw and make it a focal point. We don't. It is a story of resilience. It is an unbelievable story of there are no coincidences in life, and the perspective that it will bring all of us who hear this about the things that we have going on in our lives. It will give pause, because my word, some of the things that somebody can survive. He wrote a book called Not Child's Play. And I mean, when you're held by an army of children, where the oldest one there, might be 20, 21, 22, there might be a 30-year-old there, but the vast majority are children with AK-47s and whatnot. And again, I'm not trying to sensationalize this. It is a heck of a story. And I'm going to stop the intro right now. Dave Muller, thank you very much for coming on here and telling your story. We're going to have you come back and talk about the things that have you've experienced since then. But I just want to say thank you very, very much. Not Child's Play is the website. You can look for him as well. Please enjoy this unbelievable story, which I was just in the front seat for the most part, and by Dave Muller. Dave, I man alive. I sometimes I have somebody sitting across the digital table from me that I just, it gives me perspective on the life that I have lived here in North America, here in Western Canada, and the things that I sometimes get wrapped up in thinking that are problems. Boy, sometimes it just takes the perspective of some of the problems of other people around the world to give pause to realize things aren't so bad, for me. Dave, I just first off want to say welcome to heCast, and second, I just want to say thank you very much for giving the world really the story that you went through. A lot of people would bury that stuff and never ever talk about it. You've gone and done exactly the opposite. I want to get into the book Not Child's Play. I want to get into all of this stuff here. But first off, I just want to say thank you for your vulnerability, and thank you so much for joining us on heCast today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
For those eagle-eared or eagle-eyed people out there, they can hear, oh, this guy's got an accent. Yeah. And no, it's not Australian. No, it's not New Zealand. No, it's not British. South African. And yeah, from South Africa. And right there shows the international flavor, and that the story, we're not in Kansas anymore, everybody. The story that's going to be told is a remarkable one. I don't want to just focus on the story itself. I know that that's out there, and you've done lots of these. But I do want to talk about the story a little bit. You went through what can only be described as a situation that movies are made about, inspired by the true events. You went through something, and I want to get into it. Could you please talk about how you ended up in South Africa as a boy, and the things that transpired, that got you into sailing, and the harrowing situation that happened to you during that time? Can we get to that place? And then once we get to the place, the listener will understand that's the place we want to get to. And then we want to talk about what you did after that. Is that a good sum up? Is that a good sum up of things right there?
Yeah. Well, I'll certainly try my best. It can be a long story.
I appreciate it.
So just cut me short if I ramble on. Shall I begin at the beginning?
How did you get to South Africa, and how old were you?
Well, no, I was born in South Africa. So I was born in 1951, which makes me a nearly 75-year-old. I was born in Port Elizabeth, the city of Port Elizabeth. Both my parents had been involved in the Second World War. My dad was a prisoner of war for 2 years, and one of them on the run in Italy. My mom was a Navy Wren. She was from England. So she actually witnessed the troops heading off for the D-Day invasion. Literally saw that happening. So
wow.
She came to South Africa. I think it was in 1948. Probably searching for a husband, and she found my dad.
Yep.
And I was the result of that. So I grew up in Port Elizabeth, went to school there. Miraculously, somehow or other, ended up falling into architecture. So I studied architecture, became an architect.
Yep.
But one of the problems growing up in South Africa was, well, my parents were I suppose they would be considered liberal-minded. They were they were both would be classed as sort of blue-collar workers. But I grew up in a very loving family. But they certainly had an issue with the sort of subplot that was going on in South Africa at that time. So everybody knows about the racism and apartheid. But there were still vestiges, believe it or not, of the Anglo-Boer War.
If I could stop you there for 1 second. Sure. Not everybody knows about apartheid. You look at the generation. Like, I remember growing up when I was in high school. Now that's when Nelson Mandela was released from prison. So growing up, I knew about, I Ain't Gonna Play Sun City, artists who would be boycotting. And I knew that there was activism around apartheid. But it's funny how things dilute as generations pass. South Africa, in many respects, when you look at the development that it had and all of the good things that it had, when you look at apartheid and what it was back then, and the way of life that it became, and how polarizing it was, really at the end of the day, what a change that you have seen in your lifetime there. And so your parents, as you were growing up, were you aware that there were alternatives to apartheid around the world and that it wasn't necessarily the norm? Or was that the world you grew up in, and because you grew up in it, that's all you knew?
No, very much. That was all I knew. That was the media was very controlled. I was aware of the racial tensions because I grew up very, very close to where it all started, in the place called New Brighton in Port Elizabeth, and I can remember the army trucks rushing past and going to quell riots and things like that. And in fact, we were even caught up in it once, where a mob tried to overturn our car. But I think to sort of give a very, very brief background, and we've got to be careful not to end up in a history lesson. But in 1948, the National Party took over, gained control of the government. And that essentially was Afrikaans control, mainly made up of Afrikaans speakers. And my parents were both very English. My mom was British. My dad definitely affiliated with the British as well. He fought in the war. So I was aware they were very anti this whole apartheid thing, but it was more a case of a battle between English-speaking people and white and Afrikaans-speaking people. So it was sort of like stuck there within the white in the white segment of the community.
Yep.
So I mean, to tell you, to just give you a very brief story. In 1960, I was in grade, what would you call it? Grade 5. And I had a teacher who was very Afrikaans orientated. But the country held a referendum as to whether or not we should leave the Union, in other words, leave part of Britain and being under the control of the Queen, and should become a republic. And I knew my parents were very, very pro staying with the Union, very anti the republic. Anyway, the day after the referendum, my teacher, he said to us, okay, all of you whose parents voted for the Queen, stick up your hands. And stupidly and naively, a whole bunch of us did that. And he said, right, come forward. And we were all made to bend over, and we got the Union Jack emblazoned on our little Queen-loving backsides for that, which is an incredibly brutal thing to have done. So that kind of so my issue in those days was with Afrikaners, which the way my life has developed is actually incredibly funny in retrospect. And that was made worse by the fact that South Africa was also embroiled in fighting a proxy war for the West, between the West and the East. Basically between capitalism and socialism. In that countries like Angola and Mozambique had been pretty much taken over and run by the USSR. And South Africa was drawn in by the West to actually fight on their behalf to stop that spread of the Russian influence down south into South Africa. So I was conscripted into the army, and I objected to that. So anyway, where this is relevant to the main story that we're talking about is that I just realized I had to escape from this kind of crazy madness that was developing. So one of the things that happened when I was very young was I was a Boy Scout, and our scoutmaster invited a man who just sailed around the world in the yacht called Sandy Fjord to come and give us a talk. This would probably have been in about 1965 or so, I would guess. So in those days, things like sailing around the world were very exotic. Not many people did that. And this man had also made a film. And this was the first time I sort of saw this outside world, this amazing world of the Caribbean and the Panama Canal and the Marquesa Islands. And I remember the hula hula girls, the naked hula hula girls dancing. It made a big impression on me. And the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. And I decided then that I wanted to build a yacht and sail around the world. It literally was as simple as that. And that literally is what I actually did. So that whole drive became reinforced by the need to escape from the madness that was South Africa.
How many years was it between that that experience with the Scouts, and before you set sail? How many years was that in between?
It was. I've got to kind of quickly do the sum in my head. So
sure. How old were you when you started sailing?
Paycheck. So we started building. A friend and I started building our yacht in 1975. So what that
so it's 51 years ago.
About 12 years after that dream had been planted. And then we spent 10 years actually building the yacht. And it was launched in 1985.
Wow.
And that probably takes us up to the gist of the story.
Well, and the idea of wanting to escape the stuff that was out there, 22 years later, you think about that, like that's a pretty remarkable thing, how you held on to that dream. And we're going to talk about hope a lot in this podcast today. The hope of escaping the surroundings and finding a bigger world, something that's a little bit more compatible with how you feel and it feels right with your soul. Imagine if you would have let go of that. And it's so great that you didn't. And you get to this place where the boat gets built. And like I said, hey kids, he's exactly right. Dave's exactly right. Now's where the story gets crazy. And let's talk about that. So you start sailing, and how long were you sailing before the trouble happened?
Well, I suppose what one's got to mention, of course, is that when you're a young man, life is incredibly simple. So there's no complications of relationships or children or having to care for a family or anything like that. And but in the midst of all of this building the yacht, bang, that thing happened that happens to so many of us. We fall in love. And I met Sandy, who became my wife. So Sandy was a marine biologist, and I know it's corny and all these sorts of things, and you can have violence playing in the background, but I literally fell in love with her instantly, and I knew that this was corny, the girl I was going to marry. And here we are, 46 years on, still married. So so while the yacht was being built, the yacht's name was Arwen, by the way, just to give it a name. Our daughter was born, Tammy, and then in 1985, the year we launched the yacht, our son Seth was born. So that's just a bit of a background. Excuse me. So between 1985 and 1990, we had to learn to sail the yacht. So we did a whole lot of cruises up and down the coast of South Africa. So this is not the easiest waters to learn to sail in. So Arwen was like a Jeep or a Land Rover amongst yachts. That's the best way to describe it. A pretty indestructible vessel, very comfortable to sail in, but very slow. So come 1990, things had started to change quite dramatically. The most critical things in the world were changing that began to impact our plans. So in 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. Essentially, the USSR collapsed. So this whole thing of this threat from the red danger, as it was termed, from Angola and Mozambique, that to a large extent dissipated. And critically, in 1990, just before we set sail on our ill-fated voyage to Mozambique, which is where we're heading, Nelson Mandela was released. To come back to your previous question, what did I know? When Nelson Mandela was released that day, that was the first time in my life I actually ever saw the man. I'd never even seen a picture of him up until that point. And it was amazing. There was this lovely old grandpa who was walking out of prison. This is this terrible, terrible man that we'd imprisoned for so many years. So that set a whole dynamic going in the country where the purpose of building Arwen, which was to escape, pretty much fell away, and it was to some extent replaced with just simple adventure. So in 1990, Sandy, who was working at the local museum at the time as an expert in mollusks, the fancy name is a malacologist, if you want to know.
A malacologist, an expert in mollusks. Okay.
Malacologist, that's an expert in mollusks. Yeah, that looks. Yeah, everybody knows that a conchologist collects shells, but actually malacology was quite an undeveloped science at the time, because very few people had actually ever seen the animals that lived in the shells. So that's what she was studying too. Anyway, she heard that that there were some ecologists working at the Bazaruto Islands in Mozambique. So they islands are about 20 kilometers offshore from Mozambique, within the tropics. And because there was a civil war being fought in Mozambique, these islands were pretty much untouched and pristine. So we obviously researched that, and we knew that these people were working there. And we were told that the Civil War wasn't anywhere near this area. It was way about 300-400 kilometers inland from it and to the north of the islands. So we figured we would do a quick sail up to the islands, basically 1 month trip there and back, just so that Sandy could do some exploratory research and make contact with the people there. So that's what we did. We set off, and so we had our children at the time. Tammy was 8 years old, and Seth was 4 years old when we set sail. We set sail in April 1990. We stopped over in Maputo, and that was an eye-opener, but because Maputo was completely controlled by the Russians at that time. They were the first Russians I ever met. But it was in ruins, a city in ruins. We carried on up the coast, and to get to the most critical part of the story, just the day before we were due to reach the islands, we'd had headwinds all the time, so it had been a bit of a slog getting there. Sorry, excuse me. So it'd been a bit of a slog getting there, and I saw that there were some big thunderclouds developing inland and starting to sort of roll out towards the sea. We generally were sailing within sight of the land always. Anyway, this storm hit us that afternoon, and it was just a storm of absolutely unbelievable ferocity, unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It was almost supernatural in its intensity. It was so strong that it actually bent 10 millimeter steel plate that are on the yacht, and it ripped out the head sail. It just tore to pieces. Sandy had to go up into the story is in the book. You have to read the story in the book. But Sandy had to crawl up to the bows to bring down the sail. An incredibly brave act on her part. And she was probably at the most about 7 or 8 meters away from me, and I could not actually even see her. The sea had just been ripped up by the wind, and there was all this spume blowing around in the air. Anyway, that was all a little bit. That was pretty exhausting, and the only damage it did was to destroy our self-steering gear. So the next day we carried on up towards the island, and this was now really exciting because I'm now 38 years old at this point, and I'm finally now reaching the dream of crossing into the tropics and getting to a tropical island, which we did the following day. And I worked out. So this is now pre-sat-nav, pre-GPS days. So I was using,
of course,
dead reckoning to navigate. I worked out that we would reach, and in fact, be north of the islands around about 2 o'clock in the middle of the night. And then the plan was to hove to, which is a way of putting the brakes on the yacht, and wait until daybreak, and then enter the channel to get to the island. And that's what happened. And then I just made an unmistakable, unforgivable mistake in after I tidied up the deck that night and sort of cleaned up everything, put the yacht into the hove to position. I wasn't picking up any bottom, any depth below the yacht, which meant we were far out to sea. I went down below. And with the intention of sticking my head up into the cockpit every 30 minutes or so. And I fell asleep. And about 2 hours later, Sandy woke me and said, "Dave, we're touching bottom." And bang, the next thing, the yacht was aground. Waves were breaking over it, and it was incredibly traumatic and unbelievable. I couldn't believe it was happening. I had no idea where we were and why we'd hit something when we were supposed to be so far away. Anyway, we managed to get an anchor out and to turn the yacht, Sandy and I, so that it was facing back out to sea. There's a very huge tidal range there of 4 meters. So as the sun came up, it became very apparent that we couldn't move the yacht any further. So the kids jumped ashore and ran around, and we set about trying to work out how we were going to refloat the yacht the next day. The yacht wasn't damaged in any way at all by this. So we were waiting for the next high tide. But Seth at this point suddenly realized it was his 5th birthday. It happened to be his 5th birthday, and all he was interested in was his presents and cake and things like that. So we put out a blanket under the yacht. By that time, it was completely high and dry. That was the only shade. And we were opening Seth's presents, and I took a photograph of this. In fact, that's you can see it there above my head.
Yep.
And I was walking back towards the yacht and looked up, and I could see there was this little group of people approaching us from the direction of the islands. By then I'd worked out we were about 30 kilometers south of the islands on the mainland of Mozambique. And anyway, I said to Sandy, "Oh, great news, we've got some help coming." And so the two of us got up and we started walking towards this little group. And as we neared them, we could see that it was made up of 4 boys and 2 adults. But they behaved strangely. They stopped walking, and then the boys started to walk sort of inland towards the dunes flanking the beach. And we carried on walking, completely oblivious to what was happening. And then suddenly realized these boys were all kneeling down and pointing AK-47s at us. You know, that's one of those points when life just absolutely changes 180 degrees. It was a sight that was just completely beyond comprehension. I couldn't believe that what I was seeing. And I think conventional wisdom is that in those situations is that your body sort of goes into a fight or flight mode.
Yes. Yes.
If we'd done either of those things, we would be dead. We would not be here now. Fortunately, and maybe it was part of the fight, the way fight was manifested in us, but we literally froze. Yep. And that was the best thing we could ever have done. So we froze and then tried to appease. So we slowly walked back to the children. The boys sort of followed us all the time. They climbed onto the yacht, started throwing things out, and then they started screaming at us. And the old couple that were with them were actually their burden bearers. They'd captured them. They were, we didn't know at the time, but these boys were from Renamo, and the old couple were from Renamo.
Dave, did you understand what they were saying?
No, we couldn't understand a word.
So they were shouting at you in a language.
They were speaking Portuguese and Shangaan. Yep. But it was very obvious that they wanted us to walk south with them. And they made the old couple bundle up some of our stuff in some sheets and put them on their heads. They were very rough. They started to beat up this old couple with the butts of their rifles. And it was very clear we had no choice but to walk off with them. So at this point, the children, I think, suddenly realized that things weren't that good. Anyway, we walked away from Arwen, and the leader was a guy who had only one eye, and they were about. He was probably about 18, 19 years old at the most. The rest were all younger. They were from 13 onwards. They basically started prodding us forward with their bayonets and making us walk south with them. And this started around about 10 o'clock, 10:30 in the morning. And we walked that whole day south with them until we reached a point where we stopped. And we could hear the boys were arguing with this old couple. They were shouting amongst themselves. And I think what they were doing was actually dividing up the stuff that they'd stolen from the yacht.
Right.
Anyway, I must speed up with the story because I'm getting into detail here.
No, hold on. No.
So,
You don't. It's I get it. But I get the point that you want to speed up because you want to get to some of the things that you learn from it. But like, I mean, I got to ask you, like, in a million years, did you or Sandy ever think that this was even a possibility of something that could happen? Or was this something at that point that was completely foreign to you, that this was even a thing, that children are being raised up in this guerrilla type militia pirate type atmosphere? Did you have any idea that even existed at this point?
No, it was
Wow.
it was all unbelievable. That's the only way to describe it. You know, it sounds very trite to put it this way, but it was literally like falling into a TV set, into some kind of TV drama, like an episode of NCIS or something. You know, it was that absurd. And we just all we knew was that we had to do everything in our power not to inflame the situation, not to aggravate these boys, and to keep alive.
Did they separate you from the kids at all, or were the kids with you the entire time at this point?
No, the children were always with us.
Good.
So to jump ahead because something particularly horrific is about to happen in the story. Sorry, not trying to dangle that in front of people, but the worst was yet to come. But we took a decision, Sandy and I, that we had to do everything in our power to protect our own children, to never be separated from them. I don't think at that point we didn't realize how dangerous the situation actually was and how much our lives were under threat. But we also took a decision that we would downplay what was happening and say, you know, this is just an unexpected variation to the holiday. You know, we as a family had done some pretty weird things up to that point. Nothing quite as extreme as that, but just pretended that this was normal. And you know, look at all these lovely seashells on the beach and all these fascinating things. And those are interesting guns and sort of thing. You know, so just downplay and defuse the situation.
Yep.
So I think to sort of carry on, because what happens next is something that I find quite difficult to talk about. But anyway, I'll persevere through it.
I appreciate it.
So by then it was starting to get dark. Stars were coming out, and they forced us to climb up this huge big dune that was flanking the beach. So we trundled up to the top, and when we got to the top, you could see stretching far inland. It was almost like flat marshland, but on the other side of the dune, the landward side of the dune, was thick forest, and that was really terrifying. We entered that forest. So bear in mind that we are now in shorts and t-shirts. We haven't even got shoes on. And we at this point we're carrying Seth all the time. Tammy, bless her, 8 years old, walked every step of the way. Incredible strength that she showed.
Wow.
So when we entered that dune, crossed over the crest, there was this incredible deathly silence, because up to that point, we had the reference of the sea next to us. So we kind of, at least we knew where we were. We were on the coastline. Once we were in that forest and it was pitch black and we weren't following a path, we were just blundering our way through the trees. We knew that we were lost, and there was this terrible feeling of being lost, because if we vanished at that point, nobody would ever have found us. Anyway, we carried on walking through this forest, absolutely exhausted at this point. And it's also very warm because it's the tropics, so we absolutely sodden as well from sweat. So one of the boys, the youngest one, was sort of behind us, and he kept on prodding us forward, saying "Bambush, bambush," and the other boys were in front, and the old couple that were with them carrying the stuff. And after, I suppose, about 2 hours of walking through this forest, we reached a point where we were told to sit down in a sort of little glade. We could see that we're in a little bit of a valley base because there's quite a, you can see the star glow, sort of defines the horizon. Sorry. And
okay.
so we were told to sit down, and one boy stayed with us, but then the others all sort of carried on, and we could hear them starting to shout, and it sounded like they were sort of cutting their way through the bush, sort of like slushy bush. And I said to Sandy, "Oh, it sounds like they've lost. They don't know where they're going now." Anyway, soon after that, the leader came back. We were calling him Cyclops by that time, by the way. So this habit of calling them names because we had to identify who they were amongst ourselves.
Yes.
He came back and I could see he was exceptionally agitated. So he brushed past me, and as he walked past me, he shoved a jug, like a little plastic jug with a handle on it, into my hand. And I knew the old man had been carrying this, and the handle was sticky, and involuntarily I licked my fingers and I tasted metal, and at that point I just kind of knew that they'd actually just bayoneted that old couple to death. And that was, at that point you can't really explain how you feel. We literally thought we were the Walking Dead. But we reinforced this feeling of Sandy and myself that we had to protect the children. And fortunately, the children were oblivious to what had happened because it was all dark. We never saw it. We only heard it. The next day, we saw the evidence of it. So we weren't what we were imagining definitely happened. So we just carried on trying to downplay the whole thing. And soon after that, we reached a sort of a temporary camp, outlying camp of this Renamo terrorist group. And then anyway, we spent the night there, absolutely terrifying night amongst these youngsters. The leader of that camp.
How many people do you think were in that camp? Once you got to the camp, how many people do you think were there?
In terms of let's call them soldiers. Well, I don't know, to be honest, but I would guess in terms of soldiers, boys and men, but they were mainly boys. Probably about 20 at the most. But there was this was actually, we discovered afterwards that this was an outlying camp of Renamo, and it was actually they were growing maize and things like that there. So it was actually like a little agricultural outpost. So there were quite a lot of women and girls there as well. Unlike where we finally ended up. So anyway, the next morning, we knew they'd sent back a bunch of other troops to go and raid the yacht. And I think I must move forward because otherwise we'll use up all the time telling the story.
No, I know it's an unbelievable story, and I mean, like how long are you at that camp before the next major event happens?
Now, we only spent a night there. So the next morning, a very frightening thing happened because a Cyclops was called before. So the commander of that camp was a guy that we called Paul Patrick. I think we misunderstood his name. We gave him the name Paul Patrick. This commander, he seemed to have modeled himself on Che Guevara. In fact, that's what he looked like. His beret.
Wow.
He brought Cyclops was brought before him, and clearly Cyclops was being accused of something. And we witnessed this really terrifying scene where Cyclops was being forced to admit that he'd stolen stuff from the yacht that should have gone to the commander of this camp. Two little boys were made to go and cut some sticks, and they started to beat Cyclops on his back and on the backs of his legs, and he started screaming and shouting. Before long, this kid who'd actually the day before had killed people was himself just lying on the ground, whimpering and screaming like a little child. It was a terrible thing to actually witness. Anyway, so he was sort of made to lie there with his arms spread out on his stomach and arms and legs spread out. And poor Patrick grabbed an AK-47 and held it to his head. And can things possibly get any worse than this? But anyway, he made Cyclops shout out what was obviously an admission. And mercifully, it never went any further than that, and Cyclops was allowed to skulk off. Soon after that, we were taken to the top of a sand dune nearby. We were about 2 kilometers from the sea, and we spent the morning waiting there. And that afternoon, poor Patrick came back and gave us back essentially 2 shopping bags full of our stuff. And then a different group of boys were told us, a different group of boys were going to accompany us to the road to Villankoulis, which was great news to us because that's what we wanted to get back to civilization. So here above my shoulder, which side am I on? Here, this photo. That's the group of boys that then walked with us down that section. How
did you get a picture of them?
Yeah, so in those shopping bags, believe it or not, incredibly was my camera. Of all unlikely things that they should return, there was absolutely nothing much. The 2 critical things they returned was our camera and our anti-malaria tablets, just by incredible good fortune. So that's why I've got photographs behind me of the event. We were told not to take any photographs. But I wasn't entirely honest about that. It is quite a unique record of what happened. Anyway, we spent the next 2 days walking south down the beach. In total, we covered about 70 kilometers, and we ended up in the Renamo headquarters. And we spent. They built a hut for us there, and we spent 7 weeks living with them. And it was during that time. We had to just accept that things weren't going to get any better. We tried to get them to take us back to the yacht. We tried to get them to take us to the road, and they always kept on saying it was too dangerous. Maybe at this point I must just give a little bit of context as well as to what you've fallen into. So
how did you also communicate? I also want to know how you communicated. Like, did anybody there speak a common language, or was it all just a matter of feel by this point and trying to understand what each other was saying?
No, the communication was a source of endless trauma to us because nobody could speak we couldn't communicate with them, save for one man, Gerald Patricio. He was about 40 years old. So he became our official interpreter and protector, in fact. And we owe our lives to many people, but one of them was Patricio. Unfortunately, Patricio, he'd learned a little bit of English while working on the mines in South Africa. And unfortunately, he didn't have a particularly good grasp of English. And he'd also obviously been threatened with death if he divulged anything. He wouldn't tell us what was happening. But it was really clear that on many occasions we were questioned by the commander of the camp, the guy we call the commander. He was a 21-year-old. We knew they were asking questions about oil exploration and fishing and things like that. So you kind of know that your life depends on these answers that you're giving. But the problem was we had no idea what Patricio was saying back to the commander. Or we couldn't we didn't understand the questions we were asked, and we had no idea whether our answers were being relayed correctly. Maybe
were your kids with you again? I gotta ask the question again about the kids. Were your kids with you the whole time? Were they ever used as as leverage, to try and find these things out? And were you, at this point, are you telling them just go with the flow, just do everything that they say to do? And I know that's the number one thing people ask. I get it. There's a reason for that. While you're in this part of the story here, what were you telling the kids?
Basically carrying on the story that, this was just an incredibly exciting adventure that we were in, and there were all these strange things happening, all these amazing spiders and scorpions and things living in the bush. So we were living in a bush camp. This is not, so
Yep.
I think that there's a photograph of Tammy's. This is a photograph sneaked through a hole in the hut that they built for us. So that's a little context. So that's Tammy over there. So we set up games for the children, but it became quite clear that they weren't going to harm us. In fact, to be honest, they treated us as best they could. We had as good a food as the leaders had. We had warm water to bath in every morning and every evening, and they really loved the kids. So you see, this is where the story gets complicated in terms of trying to make it very brief, because the first contact we had with the leadership was those boys had accompanied us down after the 70-kilometer walk. And then we walked inland. We didn't know where we were heading at that point. And then they suddenly left us on the path. The boys that were accompanying us, they just abandoned us. And the next thing, this man, he was about 30 years old, but with his left arm amputated just above the elbow. He suddenly appears very well dressed in sort of slacks and an iron shirt, and he sees us and he sees Seth, who at that point happened to be playing with a big giant locust. For Seth, it was like a paradise. It was like living in a sandpit, to just digress.
Wow!
It was like he never had to wash or bath or anything like that. So that's
perspective is everything,
by the way. Anyway, this guy who we immediately gave the name Captain Hook, and he became a very important character in during our time there. He was sort of like the liaison guy. He saw Seth and he just like, whoa! He grabbed Seth with his one arm, stuck him under his arm, and started running off down the path. Which didn't make Seth very happy, but then all this guy did was he like giggled. It was very disturbing. He was. We discovered afterwards that he was drunk all the time. They were all drunk all the time. In fact. Oh
my God.
Anyway, So they actually really loved the children. They put up a swing for them. They provided bicycle wheels for them to wheel around, and they gave them a constant supply of sugar cane to munch on, and nuts and things like that. So the children were actually, when I say well treated in the context, they were incredibly well treated, and it became very apparent that these people were actually looking after us. So this is where now it becomes important, before I get into too much detail, to explain the context.
Yes.
Now, perhaps the incredible thing about this context is that it was only 32 years after 1990, just a few years ago, after I'd written the book, that I was approached by some men who said they had information that I might find interesting. And for the first time, I discovered what the background was, what was actually happening, and the context, which is slightly bizarre.
Slightly.
Can I just digress into that quickly to explain that context?
Yeah.
So we could never understand why they were kept us captured why they didn't just take us to the road. So twice while we were there, the camp was attacked. The first time was with missiles in the middle of the night, and that was the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced in my life. These things fell out of the sky, and they had proximity fuses, so they exploded above your head. I literally could feel my brain disintegrating at that point. It was very difficult to keep up the charade of this is just normal.
Wow.
Anyway, that was followed up by an infantry attack. But these children that made up the army were incredibly well trained and disciplined, wherein perhaps lies a story. And they repelled the forces that were attacking the camp. Straight after that, the commander came to us and through Patrick said the reason for that attack was to kill you. And we said, that's crazy. Why would they want to come and kill us? We were trying to work out how to run into them to escape. And then a few weeks later, there was another attack, which started with a mortar bomb attack in the camp early one morning. Yep. That was a very serious event. There were 500 troops attacked the camp, and we had to run and flee for our lives there, literally with bullets flying around.
Yep.
And there were a lot of injuries as a result of that. And we were told after that again that the reason for that attack was to kill you, and we didn't really believe that. But in fact, that was true. That was actually the situation. So what I discovered from these men was perhaps just to go back a little bit further, because I haven't explained who Renamo and Frelimo were. Renamo was let me sort of start with Frelimo. Frelimo were the government forces. So they were the Russian-trained sort of Soviet forces, army for Mozambique, the sort of official governmental army. And they were fighting a civil war against this group called Renamo, who was originally formed by the Southern Rhodesian government as a counter-terrorist measure on their eastern border. After Southern Rhodesia became Zimbabwe, South Africa took over the interest in looking after Renamo. So they were sort of in inverted commas like the good guys as far as we were concerned. They were the Western backed. So America and Portugal, and to a lesser extent Britain, were supporting them, as well as South Africa. Then in 1985, I think South Africa realized the writing was on the wall in terms of apartheid and having to relinquish power to the ANC. The president of South Africa and the president of Mozambique met at the Nkomati River, and they signed what is called the Nkomati Accord. And that basically was a non-aggression pact between the two countries. So Frelimo government, the Mozambique government, undertook to no longer support the ANC because they were giving them a safe base there right on the border of South Africa. And in return, South Africa undertook to not support Renamo. I don't think either side really actually abided by that, but and South Africa was certainly caught out 2 years later when it was discovered they were still supporting them. Now, anyway, this is very important in terms of the context. So, what I discovered from these men was their names were John, Cully, and Marius. So the first guy who contacted me was Marius, and he put me in contact with John. So John, it turns out, was actually the South African link with Renamo so he was like a link between the military and the South African government, and he had to look after the president of Renamo, a guy called Alfonso Dhlakama, and I've met him. And he was also one of the original recce's, the equivalent of the Navy SEALs in South Africa. Wow. And an amazing man. So at the time of the Nkomati Accord being signed, he was instructed to keep liaising with Renamo. And this happened until 1987, when he was suddenly one day told to get Alfonso Dhlakama, the president of Renamo, to Pretoria for a meeting. With Pik Botha, who is the Minister of Foreign Affairs for South Africa. And at this meeting, Pik Botha said that South Africa was now going to abide by the Nkomati Accord and was cutting off all support for Renamo. Dhlakama was incensed by that. That is the reason why we were captured and held by them as hostages, to force South Africa back to supporting Renamo. Because at that time, straight after that, sorry?
No, in the background then, were you guys being used as pawns? And these people were saying, okay, guess what? We've got hostages, including children, and they were trying to use you as leverage to further their agenda. Is that happening in the background without you even knowing it was happening? Yeah,
we had no idea that was happening. Yeah, and that I mean, I've seen factual proof of that. So that's exactly the situation.
All as a result of the book. All as a result of the book coming out, and now pieces have come back to give you a bigger picture.
Yeah. So
wow.
Yeah. So where were we with the story? Sorry, I've lost my.
No, hold on. Before we get back to the story, Dave, I got to know. Before you get back to the story, who's going to play you in the movie? Who's going to play you in the movie? Because, like, I mean, my God.
Everybody who's read the book said there needs to be a movie. Nobody's put.
How can there not be?
I can't even find a publisher for the book. So anyway, but that's another story. Okay. So anyway, so what the problem was that Renamo, I think everybody knew that the USSR was collapsing and that things were changing in South Africa and the ANC would be unbanned. And Renamo critically was losing the propaganda war. Ronald Reagan and the American CIA called them second only to the Khmer Rouge in terms of viciousness. Margaret Thatcher started to say unkind things about them. So Frelimo then realized that any atrocity that was perpetrated in Mozambique would be blamed on Renamo, regardless of who did it. So suddenly, so Renamo captured us, but Frelimo suddenly realized all they had to do was kill us, and Renamo would be blamed. And this would put Renamo in an incredibly disadvantageous situation when it came to negotiating peace, which was an inevitability, because they couldn't carry on fighting the war forever.
Right.
So, and that's what happened. So now to get back to John. I'm just going to use their first names, and their names are mentioned in the book, but just to protect them.
Yep.
So John now is aware that he's been told to cut all contact with Renamo, and he basically said to Foreign Affairs, "Look, that's not a very wise thing to do, because what happens if, for example, a South African airplane crashed in Mozambique? You know that contrary to what the message that's out there, that Renamo are only operating in Gorongosa area. They actually control the entire country. Only Frelimo only control the cities. How would you negotiate with them?" And he was told, "No, you cut all contact," which he did. Then in 1990, what happens, not an airplane crashes, but this crazy family run aground in Mozambique, and they get captured, exactly what he predicted would happen. So soon after we were captured, the South African government realized that they had to come and rescue us, and the only way they could do that would be to send a naval task force up into the waters. And this now precipitated extraordinary cooperation between the countries. So South Africa had to get permission for South Africa to land on Mozambique, realizing that the countries were, to all intents and purposes, at war at this time. They had to stop fighting. Everybody had to stop fighting. South Africa had to come ashore. There had to be observers and all this sort of thing. So this task force is now put together. Three naval ships are now coming to rescue us. I'm deeply.
And how long are you there at this point?
I'm saying,
at this point here, when they're getting the exercises ready to come and get you, how long are you there at this point?
We've been there. We were there in total 7 weeks, but this was all happening after about 5 weeks. So we have no idea.
And you had no idea. Like
I
want to ask about hope. I want to ask about hope, because you and Sandy are putting on the bravest faces as you can. Seth and Tammy are okay, which is unbelievable when you think about like the fear and whatnot. And I mean, how grateful you must have been that they were okay, but you were burdening the responsibility of having to fake it until you make it. You were burdening the responsibility of showing the kids that you were okay and that there wasn't fear. You were putting on the brave face for them.
Yeah.
Was there any hope? Did you guys have any hope at all?
No. We kind of, you go through a very weird cycle of hope. So you begin to read hope into all sorts of crazy, unrealistic gestures and situations. So we'd learned from Patricia through over a long period of time that helicopters had landed in that area. And we've no idea whose helicopters they were or where they were from, but clearly he described it so much that helicopters had landed there, and we'd learned that they landed there at night. And we thought, oh, okay, this means they've got to land at the full moon. So, so then the hope becomes the next full moon. This is when we're going to be rescued.
Wow.
A completely unrealistic thing to believe under the circumstances. So you climb up.
Yeah, but it helps you get through the day, though, right?
Yeah, you climb. Oh, the days drag by unbelievably. But anyway, we use various techniques to get it. So you climb up this little hill of hope, and comes the full moon, and nothing happens, and then you down the next side. And the problem is that. So then we discovered, no, Patricia, are you stupid? Of course the helicopters don't fly, and when there's a full moon, they fly when there's no moon. And they make a big ring of fire that the helicopters land in the middle of. So now you climb up the next one, but you never get as high as you were. And so by the time we were rescued, we were pretty catatonic. I mean, we actually thought we were actually mentally very strong. It was only once we were rescued that we discovered how incredibly mentally ill we were, mainly because of this ever decreasing hope that we experienced. It's quite interesting to perhaps just comment about how differently Sandy and I reacted. Gosh, there's so much one could talk about on these subjects.
Absolutely.
Sandy remained. Initially, Sandy had no hope. I was the strong one with hope. I was, we get out of this. Don't worry, I'm beating my chest. I'm the man who got to get it all. We'll survive, this sort of thing. But then I slid into incredible despair. But Sandy then grew out of because I think she then realized that she wasn't quite as much. She developed quite a lot of respect in the camp because she had some medical training. So she was seen as the doctor. So there's a whole. We could go off for 15, 20 minutes on that subject. So Sandy kept on saying to me, no, Dave, why don't you make something, ask them for a knife and build a chair or something. Because you can see the pictures behind me. That literally is what we had, a table and a few broken chairs. And I don't think they ever would have given me a knife. They would never let me touch anything that was vaguely a weapon. But I couldn't bring myself to do anything constructive because that would be an admission on my part that this was going to carry on and there was no end to it.
I see.
And so I was sort of becoming more and more hopeless, I suppose you could say. So Sandy was actually the strong one in this whole thing. She's got to have all the credit for it. That's sort of. If you think about it, there we are sitting in the bush, completely cut off. Both, none of us were jumping around full with joy, I can tell you. But me in particular I was feeling very depressed. And there were times when, here's another funny little story to tell that might ring with some men. There were times when I actually felt very suicidal. I don't know if one should talk about these things, where you just feel, I just can't carry on any longer. This is, and there are all these AK-47s leading up against trees all over the place. Every day there was shooting in the camp. And all you had to do was grab one of them. I'd even discovered how to get it off safety and simply just start shooting. And within a minute, we would all be dead.
Absolutely.
And it would be seen as a very heroic gesture on my part. But that would have been the most incredibly cowardly thing I think I could ever have done. But nonetheless, that's how I'm feeling. And you're sitting there, and so the book is based on my diary. So sorry, I don't know if you can see this. This is the actual diary I kept while I was there. So every day I wrote up this minute little print. I don't know if that's very clear.
Wow.
What was happening, and that's what the book is based on. So one morning, I was feeling very down, but I was sitting in the hut and I was writing up this little bit of this diary. And suddenly, bang, a mortar, that second attack occurs. The mortar lands just on the outskirts. And the next thing, they're shooting all around. And I mean, just like that, from feeling, I want to die, it's incredible. I've got to survive. I've never in my life felt more alive than running away with those bullets flying around. It's a terrible admission, in fact. But it is. And that's why people love adventure sports and paintball and things like that.
Yep.
You get a hell of a big adrenaline rush to suddenly find your life at risk. And the same applied to the boys and who were our captors. We thought they would run away, but they were fierce, disciplined fighters. And they whooped with joy both occasions when the camp was attacked, because now suddenly this was their self-worth being made manifest.
Wow.
So, anyway, perhaps just to get back to explain the context of the story.
I'm fascinated, by the way. I'm fascinated by every word. I'm hanging on every word.
I'm sorry.
I cannot wait to dive into the book.
I'm taking too long to tell the story. But
we're good. No, we're good. Let's keep it going here. The second attack happens. Where time's marching on, and you're going through, these ups and these downs of how you're feeling. And I mean, what's the next major event that happened at this point?
Well, I think the critical thing to note about that is we had no idea that so much was happening in the background. We had no idea that the Navy was literally steaming up the coast towards us.
Yep.
I mean, that would have raised our hopes immensely if we'd known that. But then there was a problem, because Renamo refused to release us. So Frelimo had agreed to release us, but Renamo said, no, we'll hold this family for as long as we need to.
Right.
And that then was creating a very embarrassing situation, because the task force was already assembled and on its way. And these are not easy things to put together, I've discovered, as I think America is discovering right now. So I shouldn't have said that, should I?
No. What are you talking about? It's the observance. The observance of everything is absolutely.
Yeah. So South Africa is now in the awkward situation. So they can't. They twice tried to talk to Lekama and meet up with him, and on both occasions he refused. So they had to then call John back in and say, look, please, can you somehow make contact with this man? You've had a long relationship with him. And John did.
Right.
John managed to organize a secret meeting with him in Blantyre in Malawi. And he pleaded for our release and argued for our release. And incredibly, John recorded that. And he's given me a transcript of that. And I can tell you it's an amazing thing to read. Yeah, it's in this file here right next to me. And eventually Lekama says, okay, you can have your family. I mean, just like that, after about an hour and a half of talking. But in the discussion, he pointed out to South Africa that, you are being deceived by by Mozambique. We've got people planted in Renamo, and we know that, in fact, far from them withdrawing the troops in the area where the family has been held captive, they're increasing the troops, and they plan to attack it, and they plan to annihilate that crowd, including the family. And in fact, a bounty had been put on our heads for anybody who could kill us. So John now comes back to South Africa, says, great news, they've agreed to release the family, but bad news, you're walking into a trap. Can you imagine? South Africa's now just started to negotiate with the ANC, starting to talk to Nelson Mandela, and suddenly it now gets trapped into the middle of a gunfight in Mozambique. The world would have said South Africa's attacking Mozambique. It would have been an absolute disaster. So this is where Marius now comes into the scene. So Marius then gets told, look, you better get to the border, the Kruger National Park, where there's a military base, and start intercepting the radio messages that are coming from Renamo and find out whether this is true. So that's what he does. Yep. He has to first decipher the messages. This is all still classified stuff, but these guys don't see. I think so much time has passed by that they don't mind talking about it now. So I think it's a little bit of an embarrassment to them or it would be an embarrassment to Mozambique to know that South Africa cracked their codes.
Sure.
And anyway, he starts to create what are called situation maps. And within 2 days, he discovers that, yes, it's true. There's about 1,000 troops assembling around the area where we are held captive, and they're all converging on it. So this then gets ferried back to Foreign Affairs and the powers that be, and say, whoa, hang on, we better, we simply can't go and this is too dangerous a situation. So a meeting is then arranged. This is where Cully, who was head of military intelligence, Marius worked for military intelligence, and Cully was his boss, basically responsible for military intelligence for the East Africa. He gets told he must go and meet with Chisholm and present him with Marius's maps and this evidence, which he does in Maputo. This is all pretty amazing stuff going on in the background, which nobody would even dream about or imagine happening. So President Chisholm says, okay, all right, we've been caught out. And I don't necessarily know exactly what my commanders on the ground are planning. So the only way to be certain is you better fly up there. I'll give permission for you to fly there up to Vilanculos, which is where the nearest Renamo base is. And you can meet the commander there. I'll give you all the letters required, and you can check for yourself that the troops are withdrawing. And so Cully does that. And so these three men, John, Marius, and Cully, literally saved our lives. And I've had the great privilege of meeting every one of them. Incredible men. And they're so proud of what they did.
You know what it is, Dave, you know what it is? It's like a Tom Clancy novel, and you think about Tom, I don't know if you're familiar with Tom Clancy or not, but like, his novels, they have all these characters that are all over the place, and you don't really know what's happening. And then almost in every single novel that I've read of his, they all converge in one way or another, or they link up in one way or another.
Yeah.
With when whatever the action is or whatever the resolution is,
yes.
It's all like a Tom Clancy novel. The difference being the fact that you have so many of the details from so many of the different pieces of the board at this point here is astonishing. Like, you talk about the universe or God or whatever you want to call it, saying, okay, this family is going through this ordeal, but they're going to be okay. Remarkably, the kids are going to be okay. I mean, you're talking to me about it today. We know it's a happy ending at this point. I'm going to put in the intro that it's a happy ending in that regard. I don't know, maybe happy is not the right word, but there's a resolution to it. And yet you get to see all of the different pieces on the board moving in retrospect. And that is an unbelievable, I don't know if you call it a gift. It's an unbelievable fact that's the case. I'm astounded by the fact that you have so many of these details on what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, as a family, we realize we are blessed beyond measure. Maybe I'll just quickly try and sum up everything, because I'm getting into a lot of detail. So we were rescued. So the ceasefire came into being. It was the first ever between Renamo and Renamo. And we were rescued in if you want a whole another little subsect to the dramatic thing, the most incredibly dramatic rescue imaginable.
No. We need to hear the rescue, Dave. We need to hear the rescue. We got to hear the rescue, buddy. Like, what the heck? How did it happen? And what was? We got to hear the rescue, brother.
Okay. Well, I want to tell you about the greatest miracle or mystery of all is that I ended up going back to the place from where these attacks had been launched. But that's jumping ahead 8 years.
Of course you have. Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah.
So we of course know nothing about this. We're completely oblivious to any of this happening. But we let me just say on the Saturday, I can't remember the exact date. On the Saturday, lots of airplanes flew over the camp, and unusually, when any airplane flew anywhere vaguely near the camp where we were held, if people want to look it up on a map, it's near Pomeni in Mozambique. They would shoot at these airplanes with everything that they had. I mean, it was crazy. But they never shot at any of these airplanes on this day. So we asked Patricio that evening, why? And he said, because those people are going to go and talk about you. What? No, why are they doing that? Sort of thing, like, can that be possible? That was the first glimmer that we had that something was happening. In fact, he got it a little bit screwed up. They were actually, that was probably Cully flying up to Vilanculos. And it wasn't, they weren't talking about peace or anything like that. There was just simply that situation. The next day, the Sunday, the commander came along to us. And when I say speaks to us, this is obviously all through Patricia. He said, Pack, you're going to be going. Get ready. I mean, just like that, after 7 weeks, like with no warning whatsoever, suddenly this message gets dumped on us. So we didn't have much to pack. Within 5 minutes, we were packed. And Monday came and nothing happened. Tuesday came and nothing happened. Wednesday came and nothing happened. This whole drama in the background was unfolding of, is the camp, little do we know that there were 1,000 troops approaching the camp. Thank goodness we never knew that. Sometimes it's best not to know what's happening. Anyway, on the Wednesday night, the commander comes across and says, tomorrow you leave. And at lunchtime on the Thursday, which just happened to be my birthday, amazingly, my 39th birthday. So we ran aground on Seth's birthday and released on mine.
But did you know it? Did you know it was your birthday?
Sorry?
Did you know it was your birthday? Like, had you been keeping track of the date?
They would have had no detail.
You did
like
know.
that.
Okay, so.
No, they would have had no, that's coincidental.
Yeah.
So, so they assembled the Numero Uno group, the number one fighting group, which was led by a guy that we'd actually had a lot of affection for, called Pretty Face. He had this extraordinary girl-like face, but he was their number one fighter. He was probably about 16, 17 years old. He has another funny side of the story. I'm kind of sound like I'm dropping little tidbits in for people to buy the book to find the backstory. But he got shot during that second attack, and he had a bullet lodged in his backside, and he asked Sandy to please remove it, to operate on him and remove it. Mercifully, there's a funny story about that. But anyway,
good thing she knew how to, handle mollusks.
That never happened. Thank goodness. She, as Sandy said, she studies mollusks, and they don't have spines. Yeah. So she doesn't know how the nerves get from the spine into the legs. So I think a sense of humor is an important thing to get you through these things as well. So,
amen.
So anyway, we set off, and that night, the night before, Sandy and I said, which way do you think we're going to go? So we assumed we would go to the nearest headland, which is near Pomeni. That's Cape Barra da Falsa, which has got a lighthouse on it, which needed to say was not working. But to our amazement, we ended up walking north back towards where the yacht is. And we spend the whole afternoon. We walk up along the beach, or just inland from the beach, sort of. So the beach has got you've got the beach, a little primary dune, small low dune, and then probably about a 500-meter wide flay behind it, then an escarpment with forest on it, and then the area where we lived. That's sort of like the topography there.
Right.
So around about 4 o'clock that afternoon, we found ourselves standing on the primary dune, and they'd set up a radio under some trees nearby. We knew they had a radio, and every time they spoke about the radio, Patricia always did this with his hands. And we assumed it was some old Second World War thing. Well, it actually turns out it was a state-of-the-art British scrambling radio that automatically mixed messages. I don't know who they were talking to, but indirectly they must have been talking to Cully, or linked up with Cully in Volunkulis. Yep. So we're standing there, but now still nobody's talking to us. Nobody's saying anything. We knew we'd walk through a minefield because we were following a path that was marked with grass tied in knots. And we're looking out to sea, and we think, what on earth is going to happen next? I don't know. I don't think we were thinking rationally. We were sort of like half expecting a submarine to appear out of the sea, to be honest.
Yep.
Anyway, I looked out to sea, and I could see the derricks of a ship going by, way just on the horizon. You know, when you have very cold water, sometimes the ship it causes a lensing effect, and it elongates it above the horizon. And I could see the ship was heading south. And after about 50 minutes, I looked again, and it was heading north. It turned around, and I said to Sad, "You're not going to believe it, but I think that's the South African Navy out there." And he said, "Can't be." I mean, that's actually really frightening to think that your Navy's coming to rescue.
Yeah.
You know? So, you know, we were an incredibly private family, and we were absolutely terrified at the thought of suddenly becoming sort of exposed publicly. I mean, apart from the fact that we felt very humbled and guilty for what we caused to happen.
Yes.
Anyway, soon after that, we then, by then it was evening. We went down onto the beach and walked along in the water. I still remember the beautiful scent of the dampness flowing off the land and the warm seawater that we waded through. It's an extraordinarily beautiful area I mean, like you talk about making a film, it's the most beautiful area that you could make a film in. Anyway, we walked probably about another 5 or 6 kilometers into a place where they'd built 3 huge piles of timber. And Patricia took us behind the sort of primary dune, and he made a fire, and he roasted some coconut for us because he knew this was a treat that we really enjoyed. But then it was dark, and we could see the fires had been lit. And the next thing, Captain Hook was saying, "Hey, Patricio!" So Patricio went running off, and soon he came running back and said, "Come, you must come quick! Man, come out to sea! Come quick!" And so he grabbed our stuff, the little few bags that we had, and we sort of entered this like wild scene of this party, these 3 giant fires, you know, each about the size almost of a house burning, and everybody sort of milling around, and we were just left there. Patricia disappeared, and we were just literally left standing. And the next thing, a guy with a big beard in a wetsuit comes out, and he puts out his hand to shake mine, and he says, "Are you Mr. Muller?" So I said, "Yes,
are you the Muller?"
He says, "Boy, we're glad to see you." Little did we know that was Gavin, one of the reckies who'd swum ashore. Anyway, they then brought a big ski boat, a big high-powered ski boat came screaming out of the darkness up the beach. all very spectacular stuff, because this is all happening with blazes of phosphorescent spray and things. We were put into sort of flotation jackets and had chemical light sticks tied to us. And
okay, I got a bunch of questions I got to ask here. Like I got just a bunch. First off, as you're taking the journey, you had been there for weeks. Were you happy for the change of scenery? I'm curious about that. The other thing I'm curious about is, did you, with all the imaginations and all of the things of hope that were still there, as you're on this journey, are you optimistic that it's going to turn out okay? Or by that point, was there, it's like all bets are off. You have no idea what's about to happen. And in all of the imaginings that you had, did you think that there was even a chance it would work out that way? And were the three fires basically a signal as to where the drop off was going to be?
Yeah, well, it was very obvious that the three fires were the signal for the drop off. We had no idea of the magnitude of what it had taken to get to that point, what was happening behind the scenes.
Yes.
We were catatonic at that point. We knew that if we showed any emotion, if we let go in any way of our emotion, we would just absolutely burst and disintegrate. And in fact, that happened the next day. But that's
I can imagine it did.
Ahead in the story. So we on the ski boat and we just go blasting out to sea. On this bed of phosphorescent spray. If you've seen the whale in the story of Pi, what's it that film about Pi?
The Life of Pi. The Life of Pi.
There was just that whole whale jumping out. I mean, it literally was like that.
Wow.
And we were facing backwards aft, and so there was this phosphorescent wake, and at the far in the distance, slowly this receding three glimmers of light. I can't tell you how sad I felt at that moment, because there is such a thing. These people had really protected us, and I know there's a thing called Stockholm syndrome. There's also a thing called Lima syndrome, where the opposite happens as well. I think we all had a pretty big dose of Stockholm syndrome and Lima syndrome, and we were absolutely traumatized at the thought that these guys were going back into the war, because we'd actually had grown to love them, and they had actually literally protected us with their lives. In fact, some of them lost their lives. Yes. I'm sad to say, because of our presence there. So that was probably one of the saddest moments of my life, was that image, and I can still see it before me now. Anyway,
did the kids feel that way too? Did the kids feel that way too, Dave?
No, I think the pretense of this is all just a great big adventure carried on.
Yeah.
No,
but it's an adventure.
Everybody always worries about the children.
So
the children were fine.
No, I'm more curious about the children. Like, were these friends now that they're like, oh, we're never going to see our friends again? That's
no,
did they feel the same way?
No. I think we arrived at the Tafelberg, which is the South African Navy's replenishment and hospital ship, and we dramatically welcomed on board the ship. It's blacked out. We get raised up next to it, come up, and boom! Suddenly all the lights come on, and there's the whole crew cheering, and we just no emotion at all. I feel very bad about that to this day. We were almost instantly then taken into the hospital portion of the ship, where two psychologists had been were on the ship, because they knew we would be in a state of trauma, and they basically protected us. And over the next 3 days, we sailed back to South Africa. They checked out the children as well, and they declared the children to be fine. We weren't.
Yeah.
So that's what's relevant about the next day also, which maybe some men, we kind of pretend to be very, very strong and brave and stoic and all this sort of thing. So the next day, we sit down with the two psychologists, and they say to us, now these are specialists in military trauma. One of them, interestingly, is now in Canada, in your part of the world.
Oh, really?
And there's a story to tell about that, which you might find interesting.
Yeah.
They say to us, just start telling the story. What happened? From the beginning, just start. And so Sandy and I both start telling the story. And we get to the point where that old couple were killed. And to my absolute amazement, words won't come out of my mouth. Just absolutely nothing that I could do could make me say what had actually happened. And we just collapse in tears, both of us. We just like melt inwardly. And I think that was the point where we realized, whoa, we actually are quite sick.
Yeah.
And the guy said, okay, just skip it, carry on, and we came to a few of these like roadblocks along the way.
Absolutely.
But they spoke to us, and they essentially gave us, told us what would happen and how we would feel. I wouldn't have thought it possible that your body could take control, or your mind could take control of your body to the extent that it did. Where you can't stand anymore. You just collapse on the ground. You can't talk. You can't say anything. You're just so utterly overwhelmed. I must be careful because I can feel it. After 30 some years, I can feel within me the things coming up. So that was kind of difficult to get through. And then a particularly horrific thing happened once we got to East London, where some well-meaning person showed me photographs of the yacht, which had been burnt out. Up at that point, I still had this crazy notion we'd go back and sail the yacht back. I couldn't believe that the yacht was going to... I couldn't... this is 10 years of my life. And
geographically, I got to ask the question geographically because I feel like you're going to know the answer. The zone of where you got picked up, the drop zone is in where you got picked up. Geographically, how far away would that have been? Is that on the same beach, just a number of kilometers away? Is it a different beach? How far away was that from where the yacht or the burnt husk of the yacht would have been?
It was probably about 50 kilometers away from it, to the south,
Really?
Yeah.
Not that far.
No, not that far.
Half hour, not even a half hour drive.
There were no roads. you could drive up the road.
No, but I'm saying, I'm just giving context for the audience. Like, there's a lot of Americans who listen to this, and from a mile standpoint.
Yeah, so we gleaned from Patricia that it's somewhere in the midst of all of this. So we would, in the evenings, in the cool of the evenings, we would sit around the kitchen fire. So the cooking was just done on open fires. And it was a warm, convivial. It was an open thing where Patricia felt he could talk to us. I think without people being suspicious that he was passing on secrets.
Right.
And one evening he said to us, "There's some bad news." People came, and there were Renamo soldiers looking after the yacht. They shot them, killed them, and they took the yacht. We kind of thought, maybe somebody salvaged the yacht or someone's grabbed the yacht. Maybe the people from the island have come or something like this. The fact that we don't actually know people who go around shooting people in war didn't strike. We didn't realize that at the time. What had actually happened is that I think Renamo must have attacked them to try and get hold of the yacht themselves. And anyway, but I don't know what happened. It looks, from photos I've seen, it looks as though they either fired an RPG into the yacht or a hand grenade or whatever, but it completely burnt out. And it's just disappeared beneath the sand. It's not there anymore. But this well-meaning person had shown me a photograph of the yacht burnt out on the beach, and that night we were still we were still sleeping on the Tafelberg, the ship, because I wanted to keep an eye on us. And in the middle of the night, I woke up and I just I had to. I don't know. I woke up and I knew I had to get to that photograph because I had it. It was on the table next to me. And Sandy was there as well. And I tried to stand up and I just fell down. I literally became this like little molten person on the floor. Sandy was extremely traumatized by that because she didn't know what was happening. I couldn't talk or anything. It was all.
Oh, yeah.
But the funniest thing is that while this was happening, I was very aware of, I was sort of like outside of my body. And I was sort of like looking at myself on the floor. You know, this is like stupid behavior. You know, David, get up. You know, why are you doing this sort of thing? Mm-hmm. You know, so it was like literally almost like an out of body experience. And very melodramatically, I crawled my way up the cupboard and grabbed hold of the photograph and showed it to Sandy. And she understood, and we just hugged each other and basically cried ourselves to sleep. And the next day we told the guys treating us about this, and they said, "Oh yeah, they should have warned us that would happen." And that has happened a couple of times since, very unexpectedly, on various occasions.
It's been 30-something years since the incident.
Because you're sort of coming to some of the healing process now.
I really do want to talk about the healing process. I don't care that we're over. This is one of the most astounding stories I've ever heard. And I knew it coming in, but hearing you tell it, Dave, is just, it's astounding to me. I want to know, over the years, you say if it's happened a few times over the years, it's been 30-something years since, you know, clearly a giant part of your life, not just because of the book, but because it affects your life. It changes the trajectory of your life. How many times, maybe, but more importantly, when was the last time it happened? Because I mean, when guys are healing from stuff, you know, there's not necessarily a timetable. And also sometimes you don't really know when the body is going to do something that either jumps it towards healing, or perhaps baggage shows up that you didn't realize was there. I'm curious, you know, we're 30-something years later. Are you still healing? And when was the last time kind of you had one of these sort of insights?
Yeah, no, I'm definitely still healing. I mean, I might be talking to you with a smiley face and that, but that hides a fair amount of pain as well. So the last time it happened was, okay, so again, very difficult to give a simple answer to some of these questions. So one of the things that, so we just set about rebuilding our lives, Sandy and I, but you also realize that you have been blessed by being alive. You know, you're in this absolutely unique situation that nobody who's not been in it could understand how blessed you are when you actually know you should be dead and your family should be dead. So you have this feeling that you want to give back. Sorry?
Yeah. Gratefulness comes easy.
Sorry, I didn't catch what you were saying.
Oh, I said, so you're in a place where gratefulness many times can come easy.
Oh, yes. Oh, I think we're aware of that every day. We've been so blessed. Yeah. I mean, extraordinary things have happened to us since then. So one of the things you want to give back. And so one of the ways that I wanted to give back was I felt this need to get back to Mozambique. So Sandy's handled the whole thing by simply pretending it didn't happen. So once we got back, she just, the shutters came down and she won't talk about it at all. I'm more than happy to talk about it and, you know, bugger the consequences of me bursting into tears in front of hundreds of people or whatever. So we both.
Has she read the book?
No.
Has she read the book? She hasn't read the book. This is fascinating to me. Okay.
No, never read the book. Yeah. So we can talk. There are things we can talk about there as well. Sorry. I kind of, you know, there's so much one could say about that particular subject. anyway, so one of the things is I felt I needed to get back to Mozambique. So we were very strong Christians. So the whole impact of our Christian faith during this is also now a fascinating subject. You know, how that in many ways didn't make it easier, because you're saying to yourself, God, why did this happen? You know, if you're a loving God, why are these terrible things happen? And that's a whole different subject. But one Sunday, a guy pitches up at our church organizing a missions trip to Mozambique to check out how the Protestant church is doing there. And I just think, I've got to go on this thing. So I sign up for it. I managed to convince 6 other people and the church leadership to loan us the church minibus, which is a miracle, I can tell you. You know, church politics, and off we go. I mean, it's a 3-day drive to get there, so we don't actually even know what we're going into. Now, only the leader of that group. I wasn't the leader of that first group. He was the only person who knew my background story and involvement with Mozambique. So we stopped over in Swaziland, and then there was a short hop to the border to Mozambique. And I was feeling like, so happy, and I was really looking forward. I had no idea where we were going, because that hadn't been revealed at all. There was a big group of about 50 people that we were part of. And at that time, Mozambique was still quite dangerous to visit. There was still banditry and stuff happening.
Right.
So we cross over the border, we go through the customs, and we get into Mozambique, and you just instantly know you're in a different country. And we'd gone probably 500 meters, and bang, this happened. I just collapsed completely onto the floor of the minibus, you know, and I couldn't talk. I was in tears. It was such a weird experience again, you know, that it just absolutely came flooding back like you couldn't believe. So that was the first time it happened. The second, and that whole trip, perhaps let me just finish that whole trip. So believe it or not, we ended up, we get up to a place near Mambane, near Mashishi, and now I'm getting quite nervous because this is very close to where we were held captive. And the organizers there in Mozambique, they say, okay, Sterling Baptist Church, which is the church I was part of, you're going to go with Thomas. He'll take you to where you're going to be ministering and working. I say to Thomas, you know, where are we going? And he says, we're going to a place called Augustina Netu. That's a funny name. He says, it was the Mambane headquarters for Frelimo. So gosh. I've got to be careful now because I could actually burst into tears at this point. I mean, can you believe it? Nobody knew my story. That was absolute chance, if you want to put it that way. So we end up ministering at this place that used to be the military headquarters, almost certainly from where those attacks that had been launched, because this was closer than Villankoulis, the main sort of headquarters. That was a big healing experience.
I want to stop you right there for a second here, and maybe we can take you away from the emotion and the bursting into tears by observing something that I've always been convinced in my life, and I've not gone through anything even remotely close to what what you have gone through here. Okay. But there's one thing that I have always understood, even going through my version of hardships, my definition of hardships. And it's just, to me, I've always said this: there are no coincidences. And to me, like, looking at that alone, there's no way, whether or not it made you emotional at that time, it made you, however it was that made you feel, I can imagine that there's nothing about this existence in your life, be it your faith, be it all the things that you must feel that way. There are no coincidences, because you can't write this. You cannot, you get the best scriptwriter in the world. I mean, you wrote it autobiographically because it happened, but you can't write this stuff, man. Like this is astounding.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I when I tell the story, people react like you're reacting now, and the people who read the book all say lovely things about it. What to me is astounding is I think not only do I suffer from PTSD, but I suffer from PTWD, post-traumatic writer's disorder, I think. Because I can tell you there's nothing. If you really want to go through an ordeal, write a book and try and get it published. That's a hell of a thing.
I have. My wife and I published a book. We did.
Oh, well done.
And I know what you're talking about. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, so that was an amazing healing process, being there. I mean, and then to my amazement, the people there had put the war completely behind them. I was the one sitting with the problem. So there was and maybe a little story that's I start the book and end the book with a similar story, because it really did happen. So, and it was lovely to be there amongst those people. They were so happy, and it was such a beautiful environment. It was just exactly like where we were held captive. So all those memories came back. But right. I was often in tears during that visit. On the last evening, I just felt I wanted to be alone. So I went walking off, left everybody, and I went walking off amongst the mainly palm trees. And it was beautiful. It was like a warm evening, and the smoke was sort of lying horizontally in wisps between the trees, and this lovely smell of roasting coconut. And the ladies are chomping manioc and the food and stuff. And a whole bunch of kids come along. And they started walking with me now, because, you see, we were like entertainment while we were there. So suddenly this group of about 10 kids are now following me as I'm walking along. And suddenly this thought comes to me of the whole story started, as I mentioned, with that man telling the story when I was a little boy. And one of the things he taught us to do was to tie a bowline knot. And that's the most critical yacht, to know how to tie on a yacht. He said, why is this not important? Why can't you just tie any old knot? What's special about a bowline knot? And what is special about it is that no matter how tight it's been bound, you can always undo it. There's always a way of making it loose. So you can always undo a bowline knot. And this sort of image suddenly came to me. I've got to be careful not to get too emotional about this, because it was a very touching moment. So the only thing I had, I thought, well, I'll show these kids how to tie a bowline knot. This is like a nice sort of literally tying a knot at the end of it all. Because this is what I've got to do. I've got to untie these things that are binding me. And the only thing I had was I had my sunglasses around my neck on a cord, and I sat down and showed them how to tie. And they were running, they were flying, they were singing this beautiful song about how they would mount up on eagle's wings and run and never get weary, which is from the book of Isaiah, a very beautiful song, a very happy song. Yes. So they were like fluttering around me, and I squatted down and I started to tie this knot, and they all clustered around me, as children do. And that was an amazing experience. I think they must have been really puzzled by my tears, because I just wept and wept and wept, because that really was like, for me, literally undoing all this thing that was binding me. That you if you're going to tie yourself to things in life, do it in a way where you can always, because you never know what's going to happen. Do it in a way where you can undo it. You don't have to cut the rope and destroy the rope. So it was just a nice analogy for me to use. Anyway, the second time this happened I can remember was when I was on those trips, we always had doctors with us, and I always thought, these lucky doctors. I'm an architect. Who the hell needs an architect when they're building using palm leaves and that sort of thing? I'm utterly useless in this environment. So nobody ever needs an architect. So I was feeling a little bit sort of lonely in terms of this, and envious of doctors. But about when it was in 2013, another guy pitches up at our church, and he's a member of a mission organization called Engineering Missions International. And what they do is they assemble groups of volunteer professionals to go and design projects that Christian groups are wanting to build, and usually the Christian groups have no idea of the complexity of building. You know, the TV programs made about all the pitfalls.
Yeah, they don't know what they're getting into.
They haven't got the money to employ people. They just don't have the skills at all. So I signed up for a trip to Burundi, and so I've done 3 trips with them, and they've all been amazing experiences as well. That first one was to Burundi, and it was to help rebuild a hospital near the Kabuye Hospital near Gitega in Burundi.
Yep.
Burundi was, everybody knows about the Rwanda genocide, but at exactly the same time, the genocide was occurring in Burundi as well. And so this hospital was in absolute ruins, and the people had murdered each other. So they'd suffered through that whole genocide thing as well. And these people had this mission of recreating this hospital. And it just so happened that, so we ran aground on the 28th of April. And on the 28th of April, we'd been there about 3 days, I think. The leader of the group, he always got somebody in the group. So these are people from all around the world who've now come together to tell their story. And on of all nights, that night he chooses me. It's the anniversary of everything that had happened, and literally to the hour when that old couple were murdered. And I start telling the story, and I'm feeling very happy about it. And bang, again, the same thing happened. And that's the story I actually start the book with, because a few days later, of course, they were very disturbed. They thought I was having a heart attack or something. These poor people were traumatized by my behavior.
Yes.
So one of them said, when I get back to South Africa, I need to see a psychologist. And he probably was partly right. But that's when I decided now I really needed to write the book. And so when I got back, I started to write the book. And that was a trigger for that. Yeah. Mike, we could carry on talking forever.
and I want to. I want to do a part 2 to this. I'm so captivated by your insights, by the melodic, poetic way that you're able to articulate this story. It's astounding. I also want to make a joke. No, it's not a joke. It's they had the doctors and they had the architect. Well, they also had a malacologist, so they got that in their corner too. That's always a good thing. But really, I go back and we're gonna finish it here. We're gonna finish it on this one, and we're gonna call this part 1, and we're gonna figure out a way to get you back on here, Dave, because there's so much more that I want to get into. But for the guys who are listening to this that are not just captivated by your story, but also, I know for me personally, the perspective of the big problems that I have, and I got some things that I would say that are big things. I got shoulders that I'm being heavy on, that are heavy on for my family and stuff right now. But every man does. And everyone who's listening to this is in that regard. But the perspective is amazing, and I appreciate you for that. I appreciate you being able to give every single guy who's listening to this, and the women who listen to this, who have a guy that they love, that listen to this, and you're giving perspective. The big things, the gratefulness stuff, the blessed stuff, the my goodness, we're going through this, but boy, other people have gone through things, and that perspective is beautiful. But I want to go back and I want to finish this because the bow knot has really, really captivated me. And the idea that there are people listening to this right now that they think that their knot is so tight that it could never be loosened. And you have a perspective on that, both a literal one and a figurative one. And so before we go on, that's what I want you to talk about. So you got a second to think about it. The book is not child's play. Not Child's Play, and find it, grab it if you like this story. And by the way, if anybody in our circle is has connections to anybody in the entertainment business, we've got the outline for a heck of a movie in this conversation that we have here. And I mean, to me, again, the confluence of events, my word. So Not Child's Play. Dave Muller is around. You can find him. You can search. If you have social media, I'd like you to talk about that right now. But then I just want to finish off by talking about the idea of how many people think that their knots are so tight, but they don't even realize that they have a bow knot, and that knot can be loosened. And you certainly are proof positive of that. So how do people find you, other than searching the book, Not Child's Play? How do people find you, Dave?
Well, I think probably if they want to hear more, I've got a web page, which is simply just notchildsplay.co.uk. So you just go in there. That'll give you a link, and there you can contact me directly at, I think it's david.muller at notchildsplay.co.za. That's a South African one, but that's in the same web. That's in that same website.
We'll put that in the description here too. We're going to put that in our channels too as we release the episode. But thanks, good. Yeah. I'm glad you talked about it. Yep. And then the bow knot, man. Like, let's bring us home. Because I know you have a perspective. Yeah. But how many of us men are in a, we think that the knot is not able to be loosened when in fact, it can.
Yes. Well, it depends what knot you use, you see, in your life. So, and if you don't want to end up cutting all the ropes in your life. The way to expect, analogies are there's a limit to how far you can push an analogy. But this is how I see it in my life. Because I've often thought about this whole bowline thing, and it is quite weird how nicely it bracketed the book in the end. It almost felt like somebody else was writing the book. literally, the storyline, the arc of the storyline was just so amazing. Yeah. And we haven't even touched what happened afterwards in the years, the amazing things that my family have experienced and where they are now.
This is going to be part 2, but anyway, keep going. Yeah.
But the bowline, I think, you as you go through life, sort of imagine that you've got this rope. I wish I had a rope in front of me now with 2 ends. You're holding the 2 ends. And you as a young person, you're going through life, and you're going to tie this around something now. Literally going to go up to a tree or whatever, and you're going to tie something around. This is going to be one of your anchors in life. So those things are all sorts of things. They are massively your friends when you're young, massively your friends. Yep. And for goodness sake, tie bowlines around and lasso good friends. Don't go and grab bad friends. People are going to have terrible influence upon you, and if you do, undo the bloody knot and go find somebody else, and then also you can take it further. So if I look at my life, I certainly wasn't a Christian in my younger days. I became a Christian. So when this was happened, I was a Christian. We haven't spoken about that whole side of things, which is quite a complicated story. But so I tie my bowline is tied around the biblical God. That's and I understand other people have got religions that they do the same sort of thing. So that becomes sort of like my foundation. And then around that rope, I then tie other ropes that are with bowlines that are my family, my work, my recreation, all these sorts of things. And they then have other little knots, loops tied. So you create this whole matrix of knots, if I can put it like this, but everything goes central to this one middle thing, which in my case happens to be God. And then certainly a massive one would be family. A massive one was my work, my profession, and so on. And if you find as you're going through life, and you will, because we don't have foresight, and often when you're young, you do stupid things. I mean, I'm talking to you now. I would hate to give the impression that I'm some kind of hero. I'm a very weak, scary kind of guy. You know, I mean, I watch guys playing rugby here in South Africa or American football. I must be bloody crazy, you know, to do this sort of thing. Yeah, I would never do that. I'm way too scared to do that sort of thing. So, you know, so you see heroes in all sorts of different situations. You know, men come in all weird shapes and sizes and manifestations. We've all got skills. We all make up a community.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you find that you've tied your knot around something that's bad, like an addiction, you know, find somebody who'll help you untie it. I think in your notes you've got lots of AIDS references to AIDS. So you know, and maybe if I could just get in one last final plug, because I would love to come back and talk, but just one final plug. So yeah, I think in terms of giving back, that is one of the most important things that you can do. So my family have realized that we don't really own the story. We can't claim to own the story. We should be dead. It's as simple as that. The story belongs even to those Renamo people, even to President Chisholm, even to the politicians in South Africa, certainly to the men who came and rescued us, and those extraordinary guys who came ashore, the Gavins of the world. We owe an immense debt to them. So how do you repay them? And so there are many things that you can do in terms of social work and helping in the community. But one of them is that we've taken a decision to donate all the proceeds from the sale of Not Child's Play to a charity called Hostage International. They UK-based. There's an American derivative of it as well. And they don't get involved in hostage negotiations. They realize, as the psychiatrist who treated us, that people who come out of that situation are wounded and weak and confused. You don't know who you are anymore. And they need help, and their family need help. And so that's what they do. They step in at that point. Very confidential work that they do. Very difficult to raise funds for, because they can't go out and say what they do.
Yeah.
And it's a need that's increasing all the time. You know, I mean, right now as we're talking, I can see situations developing in the world where taking hostages is such a simple thing to do, you know, to extort a response. So, yeah, if you buy the book, I assure you the vast majority of the funds are going to be going to Hostage International. You can contact them. There's a link on that web page that I gave you. You can contact them and check it out with them if you want to. This is just a scam on my part to try and get rich quickly. But anybody who thinks they're going to get rich out of selling books is living in.
Yeah, you sure don't. Yeah. No. It's for the love of the project. And I can't. You're. You know, again, I appreciate the fact that I'm not going to put you on a pedestal. You know, and I appreciate the humbleness there when it comes to that. You know, but at the end of the day, I know a little bit of Bible. I can speak a little bit of Bible, and I know that one thing that we're called to be is be a light, be the light in the darkness. You are very much that, and I'm not going to say that you don't stumble. I'm not going to say that you're going on the straight path of light. As you know, none of us are perfect. But Dave, you are a bright light, and you don't have to be. And there's no one on this planet that would ever blame you for not wanting to be, having gone through what you've gone through. But you are a light, and I just want to say, from the bottom of my heart, I want to express the gratefulness that you have gone through this and have used it in so many positive ways and strive to use it in so many positive ways. This is literally why we do the show. It's why He Changed It exists. It's a place where guys can, you know, share their story, whatever that looks like, or an experience. And sometimes it's a long tale, or sometimes it's a short ordeal that they go through, but we share it so then others can hear it and take the perspective as to what we're going through, This is why He Changed It exists. And I mean, this is our longest episode ever, and I'm really grateful that it's you. I'm really grateful that it's this story, because I mean, as we like to say on the show, so much good food for so much good thought. Plus, it's a heck of a yarn. It's a heck of a story. It's a heck of a narrative. My gosh, it's one of those things. And I can't thank you enough for your humility and being that light. And you really truly are. The idea of Christian is literally the word little Christ, and I feel Him beaming from you. I really, really do. And it's all the good stuff. It's all the good stuff. And I don't worry about the dogma. I it's the light that I love. And to me, there's a lot of people flailing around in the dark, and listening to you today. Thank you. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you for, exposing yourself to the risk that you might burst into tears, even though you didn't here. You were remarkably composed. And I just want to say thank you, Dave, for everything that you've done to give back to the world in the small ways and in the big ways. So thank you for that, brother.
Yeah, well, certainly from my side, Mike, thank you. And you, of course, do realize that people like me have no light to shine unless we have somebody like you to broadcast it out into the world. So we desperately need people like you. So I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Well, you did the heavy lifting, my friend. That's not a problem, but you did the heavy lifting here. Everybody, thank you so much for being part of this very special episode of heCast. If you haven't downloaded the He Changed It app, what the heck are you waiting for? Go to hechangedit.com, see what everything's all about as we scale this thing, and have a heck of a lot of fun doing it, and help a lot of people as we do it. This has been another episode of heCast, the official podcast of He Changed It. My name is Mike Chisholm. Go change something.